Oh, God. Thought I was going to age well. I didn't think I was going to age at all.
There's a priest in the driveway.
Hi, I'm Sophia Jessica, and this is Angel, and welcome to the fan carpet.
Hi,
Hi, how are you doing?
good. How are you?
Yeah, doing well, thank you. It's such a pleasure to speak to you. So if we go back to the beginning, was there a defining moment for you to get into the industry?
Oh gosh, that's a great. Yes, there really was actually, and no one has asked me that question before. So thank you. I'm half Egyptian, and I grew up going back and forth to Egypt, and I moved to Egypt in my mid-20s to make a documentary film about feminism and Islam.
Okay.
And while I was there, I was invited to the Cairo Film Festival, and I had never seen the kinds of movies that were screened that year in the Cairo Film Festival. And I was completely blown away by the contrast with what I was trying to do in a sort of a political statement that I was trying to make through this documentary, because I have family that were like, my great aunt was a very famous feminist in Egypt, and I was kind of like trying to tell her story and through the knock-on effects of all the feminist movements in Egypt. And here I was like struggling with reality. And I went and I saw these films at the Cairo Film Festival, and I was so fundamentally changed and moved by them. And some of them were really, like, there was one in particular that was kind of poorly made. Like you could see like the microphone come down, the boom would come down, and others were like, absolutely gorgeous, like desert poetry, and but the point that I experienced was that the story, the film was so transporting and so ultimately, I meant transformative, that it after that I quit the documentary that I was making, and I went back to the United States, and I went to NYU Film School. So
Okay. Is documentary filmmaking where you'd like to go back to, or are you quite happy doing
no, I would never go back
narratives?
to documentary filmmaking.
Okay, fair
No,
enough.
I mean, I've been a writer, a narrative fiction writer for many, many years.
Mhm.
And I think that's specifically the experience that I had, which is that, it's this kind of human story, that if you're getting that right, that's really, for me personally, where it gave me permission, to explore that, as opposed to having it be so based hardcore political reality. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so what can you tell us about The Uninvited and why you wanted to tell this story?
Well, I wanted to tell the story because of a couple of reasons. I originally, so because I've done a few of these, like I can't remember exactly if I've told you certain things, but um, my husband in real life is Walton Goggins, right? And
Mhm.
so we were in real life, we were hosting a party, and we had a young son, and he was a few years old, and so still in that early stage of where, bedtime is such a big deal. And right when I was, getting the house ready for the party and putting my son down, an old woman showed up believing she'd returned home. So that inciting incident that's in the movie
Mhm.
really happened, but, I helped figure out where to get her back to fairly
Mhm.
quickly. And but her the experience stayed with me for a very long time, and I imagined what it would be like if she had come into the house and stayed throughout the duration of the evening. And the reason why I was very haunted by her loneliness was, fundamentally, it's very distressing when you meet an older person who's lost, and has outlived everyone that they've ever known. Like she was so old that there was no one else around, and she was in assisted living senior home, you know. Um, and but I also, at that point in my life, felt incredibly lost myself, having become a mother. Like I was very disoriented in this transition from who I was before to who I was becoming. And I really was, it was quite remarkable to me the ways in which my husband was immune to that change, you know, and that there seemed to be like, as supportive as he was of me and of our son and our family, there was a male female thing that I was not prepared for. Like that, you know, in this post-feminist world, like that this still existed, you know, that I succumbed to the sort of domestic role and that he sort of came and went, you know. And so in the film, obviously I captured the real life experience of the beginning, at least, of the woman, and everything else about that was imagined. And this is not autobiographical. This is not our marriage. This is not our house, whatever, you know, but I'm
Mhm.
using what I know in that sense of what I really wanted to express and explore was this idea of women and this sort of caretaking role and the way in which they lose themselves to that and the way in which men are literally free to come and go. They move through that domestic space like very easily where they kind of get more and more stuck, you know? And so there were ideas of, you know, aging and Hollywood that I wanted to tackle. There were ideas of motherhood and selfhood that really motivated me to write it. And the idea of like loneliness. And Los Angeles is a very, very lonely city. And there's something about that that um, you know, exists in a lot of other places, but loneliness in particular. And the only solution or cure for loneliness is obviously connection. And so I wanted to write a film where the most profoundly haunted, lonely person comes into these people's lives who they think they're living a fuller life than they're actually living. And, you know, ironically, she's the one that brings them to a point of like really profound connection. So that was really the reason. And Walton had said in Q&As before that it might be called The Uninvited, but it really is the film is the story is an invitation to live your life in a more fulfilling way.
Awesome. What does it mean for you to be a storyteller and tell stories in this way?
Oh, it's everything to me. You know, I was always in search of like of a meaningful career and had many. You know, I worked in campaign politics. I had an internet company. I almost got a master's in anthropology, but I was always just really interested in, you know, the human condition. And there's nothing more human than being a storyteller. And
Mm,
there we know ourselves obviously through the stories that we tell. And I'm very interested in our sort of post-religious culture of the West, and that is baked into this particular story itself. Like the mother, her, you know, is asked by her child if she believes in God, and she says, I don't, but I wish that I did. And she then proceeds to tell him her own mythology, the story that she's made up about this little fish that, you know, becomes a star and then returns home. And, you know, she's making up for what's missing in her culture, meaning wise. And so in that, in my film, is really the argument for why I even wanted to be a filmmaker to begin with, which is to
mm,
participate in understanding the human condition, exploring it, and um, understanding the nature of storytelling itself. And even Gerald, the director played by Rufus Sewell, you know, he's telling a story but on a much bigger scale, you know, and so much big of a bigger scale that he thinks that he's God himself, you know.
mm, absolutely. What's Walton like to work with?
Um, I mean, he's really great. I mean, I've, you know, seen him go to work and prepare for work for 20 years. So I had the cheat sheet, you know, like I
Mhm.
knew what it was like to work with him just by seeing, you know, having those nightly conversations about this director, that director, this experience or whatever. So, and the one thing I know about him and is that he's always incredibly prepared, if not like the most prepared person on set is his superpower. And he is so method and completely in, So when I was working with him, I wasn't really working with my husband. I was working with Sammy.
Mm, awesome. Yeah, he's incredible. Everything I've seen him in, he's incredible.
I mean, he's
Um,
just palpably different when he takes on a role.
yeah, awesome. All right. Do you have any memories from filming that you'll take with you for the rest of your career?
Yes, there was a scene um so do you remember the scene where there's the husband and wife are in front of the fireplace
Yes.
and they're not talking?
Yes.
Well, so it's really interesting. In a film that was really a current of dialogue and there was so much conversation. Well, this scene had dialogue, and the Elizabeth, who played, Rose, she said, I'm not feeling, I don't know if I would say this or he would say this at this point. And we had rehearsed this, and we had read all of these scenes many, many times, but it's very different when you're in the middle of making it and you're the actor and you're like the character now. And she just was standing in front of the fireplace and was like, I don't think he could or should or would say this to me, and I certainly wouldn't say this back. And I said, all right, let's do it. Let's block the scene. They lit it. We went off to go and try and figure out what are we going to do in place of that scene, right?
Hmm.
And they argued and totally saw like their characters so different. Like they were advocating for their characters in ways that was like unbelievably beautiful and profound. And but we didn't have the lines, right? And we were losing time and we couldn't go over. And the AD kept coming and saying, we got to go, we got to go. And we didn't have the lines. And so I said, all right, let's go do the scene. But we're going to do it exactly like we blocked it, but just don't talk. There will be no lines, you know? And it was so beautiful because her grief was so much more palpable in that moment. Like she couldn't stop crying. And his anger was so strong. And it was like what I learned for me for the rest of my career, it was first of all like really listening to the actors, really the reward of totally pivoting into what was the authentic reaction to a scene. And then also just like being alive and in the moment, like everybody always says, it's what happens on the day. And I'm very grateful that I listened and that I also had an idea of how to save this moment. And it after we shot it, I was like, this is like the to me, it's my favorite movie moment in the film. And it feels like, oh, how brilliant in a film where this couple doesn't stop talking to each other. You know, the most they've ever communicated with each other is when they're not talking.
Absolutely. So aside from the uninvited, what are you working on next that you can talk about?
I am, I'm writing a number of scripts, but we'll see. I'll never make the mistake of only like pushing one script for, especially the way things are in this moment. I have a film. It's called "I Stole Your Tears," which is set in the Middle East. It's set in Egypt. So it's something very personal to me, but it's also like, very important for me to try and get this made, but much bigger budget, much harder to pull off, So, I have a number of other scripts. Another one is called Best Divorce Weekend Ever, and I think that's more in line with The Uninvited. And I my goal really is to make that film next because it feels like that's something that I might be able to do after having made this film. So
Awesome. Looking forward to that. So what are you hoping audience will take away from the uninvited when they see it?
um I guess it's really, I don't really want to tell anybody what to feel, but I will
Hmm.
say, having shown this film now many, many times and having audience members come up to me and tell me how it has made them see a certain person in their life differently or feel them differently, or how they just feel personally seen. Those are the kinds of things that are extremely powerful as a filmmaker, and especially when people reach out that I've never met before through Instagram or whatever, and they tell me they saw it like 4 or 5 days ago and they're still thinking about it, and they still feel that, and that was really something that I hoped. This is not a revolutionary idea. We know this. We know that isolation and loneliness and not feeling seen by the people in your life is extremely distressing. We know that connection is extremely satisfying. And we tell these moral tales all the time about changing our priorities and so that we are more connected and together. But somehow they don't really change our behavior, But there is something about like going to the theater and seeing a film that feels lightly funny for a while, that feels satirical, that feels all of these things, that slowly starts to unpack deeper emotions and brings you to that finish, which is, I think to a lot of people, a surprising emotional punch at the end.
Absolutely. And just finally, where can we find you online to keep up with everything you're doing?
Well, I do have an Instagram account. So it's Nadia Somerset, which is my son's middle name. and that's about it.
Awesome.
And Google.
Wonderful. Well, Nadia, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you today. Congratulations with the film, and I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Take care. Look after yourself. Thank you.
Thank you for watching The Fan Carpet. Please follow us on Facebook, X, and Instagram for more content. Bye for now.
You are a mother, just giving all the time, right?
Really? She's still here?
Barbara didn't come yet.
Will you just go to the party?
And just like that, there she is. The switch she can flip in an instant.
Who are you? How did you get here?
Maybe she's a ghost.
She's the witch. Do you see me?
Yes, Helen, I see you.
The past and the future are both delusions.
Was this all a dream? How does it end?
Why don't you give me a sign, like the sea that leads a trail along that shore? It's not your problem, it's mine. Everybody thinks that I'm okay. Sometimes I think I am too. I'm on the outside looking in, I'm waiting for the shockwaves to begin. Oh, won't you let me hold you for one time? Just a rainy day in a London cafe, a London cafe. So give me one last serenade. Say to me or swear at me till the night turns into day. And it was a shame when daylight faded, because we didn't notice at all.
Thank you for watching The Fan Carpet. If you like this video, be sure to click that thumbs up button at the bottom of your screen. And also be sure to subscribe to the Fan Carpet YouTube channels. They're absolutely free and so much fun too. Be sure to check out the official website, thefancarpet.com. Also, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay up to date with reviews, competitions, the latest news, and so much more.